The Poesy of Scalds, Section 23. How should the heaven be periphrased? Thus: call it Skull of Ymir, and hence Giant's Skull, task or burden of the dwarves, or helm of Vestri and Austri, Sudri or Nordri, land of the sun, of the moon, and of the stars of heaven, of the wains and the winds, helm or house of the air and the earth and the sun. So sang Arnorr Earl's Skald. So large of gifts ne'er mounted, young lord of shields on ship deck, 'neath the ancient skull of Ymir, splendid this prince's largesse. And as he sang again: bright grows the sun at dusking, the earth sinks into the dark sea, the toil of Austri bursteth, all the ocean on the fells breaks. Thus sang Bodvar the Halt: for never 'neath the sun's plain shall come a nobler landward, keener in battle onset, nor a brother of Ingi better. And as Thjodolfr of Hvin sang: Hjord's son drove to the steel play, high swelled the godlike anger in the mind of Meili's brother, and the moon way 'neath him quivered. Even as sang Ormr Barreyskald: Lady of Draupnir's gore streak, however great I know him, the wielder by right he ruleth, of the Wain's road sees me gladly. Even as the skald Bragi sang: he who threw the dead eyes of Thjazi Skadi's father into the wind's wide basin, or the abodes of menfolk many. And as Markus sang: 'tis long since the dear-loved warder of seamen was born on the wave-girt earth-bottom of the storm-container, each man praises the sublime age of the ring-dispenser. Even as Steinn Herdisarson sang: I sing the holy ruler of the high world-tent rather than men, for very precious is he, his praises tell I. And as Arnorr Earl's Skald sang: help, dear King of Heaven, the day's plain, help my Hermundr. And as Arnorr sang further: soothfast King of the Sun Tents, help stout-hearted Ragnvaldr. And as Hallvardr sang: Knutr wards the land as the ruler of all wards the radiant Fell Hall. As Arnorr sang: Michael, wise of understanding, weighs what seems done ill and good things, then the monarch of the Sun's helm at the doom seat parts all mortals. {24) How should one periphrase the earth? Thus: by calling her Flesh of Ymir, and Mother of Thor, daughter of Onarr, Odin's bride, co-wife of Frigg and Rindr and Gunnlod, mother-in-law of Sif, floor and bottom of the Storm Hall, Sea of Beasts, daughter of Night, sister of Audr and of Day. Even as Eyvindr Skald Despoiler sang: now the beaming gold is hidden in the body of the mother of the giant's foe, the counsels of a kindred strong are mighty. As sang Hallfredr Troublous Skald: in council 'twas determined that the king's friend, wise in counsel, should wed the land, sole daughter of Onarr, greenly wooded. And he said further: the Raven Abode's brave ruler got the broad-faced bride of Odin, the land, with kingly counsels of weapons, lured unto him. Even as Thjodolfr sang: the ruler glad in warriors in the rowed hull doth fasten the ships of men to the strand's end, at the head of the sea keel-ridden. As Hallfredr sang: full loath to let the land slip I hold the lordly Spear Prince, Audr's sister is subjected to the splendid treasure spender. Thus sang Thjodolfr: far off when the dart-slow sluggard stood, when the sword inciter in ancient days took to him the unripe co-wife of Rindr. {25) How should one periphrase the sea? Thus: by calling it Ymir's blood, visitor of the gods, husband of Ran, father of Aegir's daughters, of them who are called Himinglaeva, Dufa, Blodughada, Hefring, Udr, Hrun, Bylgja, Bara, Kolga, land of Ran and of Aegir's daughters, of ships and of ships' names, of the keel, of beaks, of planks and seams, of fishes, of ice, way and road of sea kings, likewise encircler of islands, house of sands and of kelp and of reefs, land of fishing gear, of sea fowls and of fair wind, even as Ormr Barry's skald sang, on the gravelly beach of good ships grates the blood of Ymir. As Refr sang, the mild deer of the masthead beareth o'er the murky water from the westward her wave-pressed bows, the land I look for before the beak, the whale-home shallows. Even as Stein sang, when the fallow fell wall's whirlwinds wove o'er the waves full fiercely, and Aegir's storm-glad daughters tore, of grim frost begotten. And as Refr sang, Gymir's wet-cold spae-wife wiles the bear of twisted cables oft into Aegir's wide jaws, where the angry billow breaketh. It is said here that Aegir and Gymir are both the same, and he sang further: And the sea peaks Sleipnir slitteth, the stormy breast rain-driven, the wave, with red stain running out of white Ran's mouth. As Einar Skulason sang, the stern snow wind has thrust out with strength the ship from landward, the Swanland steed sees Iceland into the surf receding. And as he sang further, many a stiff rowlock straineth, and the noisy strand of fish gear the sea, the lands o'ercometh, men's hands oft span the stays. And he sang yet further, the grey isle fetter urges Haiti's raven ship onward, gold beaks the fleet ships carry, rich that faring to the chieftain. And he sang again, the isle rim autumn chilly impels the dock's cold snowshoe. And thus also, the cool land's surging girdle before the beak springs asunder. As Snaebjorn sang, they say 9 brides of skerries swiftly move the sea churn of Groti's island flower bin beyond the earth's last outskirt, they who long the corny ale ground of Amlodi, the giver of rings now cuts with ship's beak the abiding place of boat-sides. Here the sea is called Amlodi's churn, as Einar Skulason sang, the sturdy drive-nails weaken in the swift swirl, where paleth Rockney's heaving plain, wind puffs the reefs against the stays. Section 26. How should one periphrase the sun? By calling her daughter of Mundilfari, sister of the moon, wife of Glenr, fire of heaven and of the air, even as Skuli Thorsteinsson sang, Glenr's god-blithe bedmate wadeth into the goddess's mansion with rays, then the good light cometh of grey sarked Mani downward. Thus sang Einar Skulason: Whereso the lofty flickering flame of the world's hall swimmeth o'er our loved friend, who hateth and lavisheth the sea gold. Section 27. How should the wind be periphrased? Thus: call it son of Fornjotr, brother of the sea and of fire, scathe or ruin or hound or wolf of the wood, or of the sail or of the rigging. Thus spake Sveinn in the Nordersetu Drapa. First began to fly Fornjotr's sons ill-shapen. Section 28. How should one periphrase fire? Thus: call it brother of the wind and the sea, ruin and destruction of wood and of houses, Halfr's bane, son of houses. Section 29. How should winter be periphrased? Thus: call it son of Vindsvalr, destruction of serpents, tempest season. Thus sang Ormr Steinthorsson: to the blind man I proffer this blessing, Vindsvalr's son. Thus sang Asgrimr: the warlike spoil bestower, lavish of wealth that winter, snake's woe, in Trondheim tarried, the folk knew thy true actions. Section 30. How should one periphrase summer? Thus: call it son of Svasudr, and comfort of serpents, and growth of men. Even as Egil Skallagrimsson sang: we shall wave our swords, O dyer of wolf's teeth, Make them glitter, a deed we have for wreaking in the comfort of dale serpents. 31. How should man be periphrased? By his works, by that which he gives or receives or does. He may also be periphrased in terms of his property, those things which he possesses, and, if he be liberal, of his liberality. Likewise in terms of the families from which he is descended, as well as of those which have sprung from him. How is one to periphrase him in terms of these things? Thus, by calling him accomplisher or performer of his goings or his conduct, of his battles or sea voyages or huntings or weapons or ships. And because he is a tester of weapons and a winner of battles, the words for winner and wood being the same, as are also those for tester and rowan, therefore from these phrases skalds have called man ash or maple, grove, or other masculine tree names, and periphrased him in such expressions in terms of battles or ships or possessions. It is also correct to periphrase man with all the names of the ^sir, also with giant terms, and this last is for the most part for mocking or libelous purposes. Periphrasis with the names of elves is held to be favourable. Woman should be periphrased with reference to all female garments, gold and jewels, ale or wine or any other drink, or to that which she dispenses or gives. Likewise with reference to ale vessels, and to all those things which it becomes her to perform or to give. It is correct to periphrase her thus, by calling her giver or user of that of which she partakes. But the words for giver and user are also names of trees. Therefore woman is called in metaphorical speech by all feminine tree names. Woman is periphrased with reference to jewels or agates for this reason. In heathen times, what was called a stone necklace, which they wore about the neck, was a part of a woman's apparel. Now it is used figuratively in such a way as to periphrase woman with stones and all names of stones. Woman is also metaphorically called by the names of Asynjur, or the Valkyrs, or Norns, or women of supernatural kind. It is also correct to periphrase woman in terms of all her conduct or property or family. 32. How should gold be periphrased? Thus, by calling it Aegir's fire and needles of Glasir, hair of Sif, snood of Fulla, Freyja's tears, talk and voice and word of giants, Draupnir's drop and rain or shower of Draupnir, or of Freyja's eyes, Otter's ransom, forced payment of the ^sir, seed of Fyris plain, cairn roof of Hulgi, fire of all waters and of the hand, stone and reef, or gleam of the hand. 33. Wherefore is gold called Aegir's fire? This tale is to the same purport as we have told before. Aegir went to Asgard to a feast, but when he was ready to return home, he invited Odin and all the ^sir to visit him in 3 months' time. First came Odin and Njordr, Freyr, Tyr, Bragi, Vidar, Loki, likewise the Asynjur, Frigg, Freyja, Gefjun, Skadi, Idun, Sif. Thor was not there, having gone into the eastern lands to slay trolls. When the gods had sat down in their places, straightway Aegir had bright gold brought in onto the floor of the hall, and the gold gave forth light and illumined the hall like fire. And it was used there for lights at his banquet, even as in Valhalla swords were used in place of fire. Then Loki bandied sharp words with all the gods and slew one of Aegir's thralls, him who was called Five-Finger. Another of his thralls was named Fire-Kindler. Ran is the name of Aegir's wife, and their daughters are 9, even as we have written before. At this feast all things were self-served, both food and ale, and all implements needful to the feast. Then the ^sir became aware that Ran had that net wherein she was wont to catch all men who go upon the sea. Now this tale is to show whence it comes that gold is called fire or light or brightness of Aegir, of Ran, or of Aegir's daughters. And now such use is made of these metaphors that gold is called fire of the sea and of all names of the sea, even as Aegir or Ran had names associated with the sea. Therefore gold is now called fire of waters or of rivers, and of all river names. but these names have fared just as other figures also have done. The later skalds have composed after the examples of the old skalds, even those examples which stood in their poems, but were later expanded into such forms as seemed to later poets to be like what was written before, as a lake is to the sea, or the river to the lake, or the brook to the river. Therefore all these are now called new figures, when terms are expanded to greater length than what was recorded before. And all this seems well and good so far as it concurs with verisimilitude in nature. As Bragi the Skald sang, I was given by the battler the fire of the brook of sea fish. He gave it me with mercy for the drink of the mountain giant. 34. Why is gold called the needles or leaves of Glasir? In Asgard, before the doors of Valhalla, there stands a grove which is called Glasir, and its leafage is all red gold, even as is sung here. Glasir stands with golden leafage before the high gods' halls. Far and wide, this tree is the fairest known among gods and men. 35. Why is gold called Sif's hair? Loki Laufeyarson, for mischief's sake, cut off all Sif's hair. But when Thor learned of this, he seized Loki, and would have broken every bone in him, had he not sworn to get the black elves to make Sif hair of gold, such that it would grow like other hair. After that, Loki went to those dwarves who are called Ivaldi's sons, and they made the hair, and Skidbladnir also, and the spear which became Odin's possession, and was called Gungnir. Then Loki wagered his head with the dwarf called Brokr, that Brokr's brother Sindri could not make 3 other precious things equal in virtue to these. Now when they came to the smithy, Sindri laid a pig's skin in the hearth, and bade Brokr blow, and did not cease work until he took out of the hearth that which he had laid therein. But when he went out of the smithy, while the other dwarf was blowing, straightway a fly settled upon his hand and stung. Yet he blew on as before, until the smith took the work out of the hearth, and it was a boar, with mane and bristles of gold. Next he laid gold in the hearth, and bade Brokr blow and cease not from his blast until he should return. It went out, but again the fly came and settled on Brokr's neck, and bit now half again as hard as before, yet he blew even until the smith took from the hearth that gold ring which is called Draupnir. Then Sindri laid iron in the hearth, and bade him blow, saying that it would be spoiled if the blast failed. Straightway the fly settled between Brokr's eyes and stung his eyelid, but when the blood fell into his eyes so that he could not see, then he clutched at it with his hand as swiftly as he could, while the bellows grew flat, and he swept the fly from him. Then the smith came thither and said that it had come near to spoiling all that was in the hearth. Then he took from the forge a hammer, put all the precious works into the hands of Brokr his brother, and bade him go with them to Asgard and claim the wager. Now when he and Loki brought forward the precious gifts, the ^sir sat down in the seats of judgment, and that verdict was to prevail which Odin, Thor, and Freyr should render. Then Loki gave Odin the spear Gungnir, and to Thor the hair which Sif was to have, and Skidbladnir to Freyr, and told the virtues of all these things, that the spear would never stop in its thrust, the hair would grow to the flesh as soon as it came upon Sif's head, and Skidbladnir would have a favouring breeze as soon as the sail was raised, in whatsoever direction it might go, but could be folded together like a napkin, and be kept in Freyr's pouch if he so desired. Then Brokr brought forward his gifts. He gave to Odin the ring, saying that 8 rings of the same weight would drop from it every 9th night. To Freyr he gave the boar, saying that it could run through air and water better than any horse, and it could never become so dark with night or gloom of the murky regions that there should not be sufficient light where he went, such was the glow from its mane and bristles. Then he gave the hammer to Thor, and said that Thor might smite as hard as he desires, whatsoever might be before him, and the hammer would not fail, and if he threw it at anything it would never miss, and never fly so far as not to return to his hand. And if he desired, he might keep it in his sark, it was so small. But indeed it was a flaw in the hammer that the forehaft was somewhat short. This was their decision, that the hammer was best of all the precious works, and in it there was the greatest defence against the Rime Giants, and they gave sentence that the dwarf should have his wager. Then Loki offered to redeem his head, but the dwarf said that there was no chance of this. "Take me then," quoth Loki, but when Brokkr would have laid hands on him, he was a long way off. Loki had with him those shoes with which he ran through air and over water. Then the dwarf prayed Thor to catch him, and Thor did so. Then the dwarf would have hewn off his head, but Loki said that he might have the head, but not the neck. So the dwarf took a thong and a knife, and would have bored a hole in Loki's lips and stitched his mouth together, but the knife did not cut. Then Brokkr said that it would be better if his brother's awl were there, and even as he named it, the awl was there, and pierced the lips. He stitched the lips together, and Loki ripped the thong out of the edges. That thong, with which Loki's mouth was sewn together, is called Vartari. End of Skald's Kaparmal, section 35. Recording by Expatriate in Bangor, Maine.